Have you ever heard a song that you haven't thought about in years and years, and suddenly you weren't just remembering the moment, you felt like you were actually back there? Maybe it was your first school dance, or maybe a road trip or a wedding, maybe a song you heard at a favorite grandparent's house. Somehow, just a few notes of music can unlock memories that had seemed completely forgotten. But why? Is music simply attached to our memories like a soundtrack in a movie? Or is it actually helping our brains build and organize those memories in the first place? It turns out the answer may be much more interesting than most people realize. If that sounds interesting, please stay tuned. Hi, I'm Becky from Music is Academic, and I work with teachers, schools, families, and organizations to turn brain science into practical tools that support learning, attention, and regulation. Most of us have had that experience with an old song. Maybe you're walking through the grocery store or sitting in a restaurant. Maybe you just have Spotify on your phone when a song comes on that you haven't heard in years. Within seconds, you're transported somewhere else entirely. You can suddenly picture the room you were in. You remember the people that you were with, and even feel some of the same emotions that you felt back then. It's almost as though the music opened a door you didn't even realize was still there. What's interesting is that we usually say, that song brought back a memory, but that's only part of the story. The music isn't just reminding you of the past. Along with the melody comes the sights, sounds, emotions, conversations, and sometimes even the smell of the room or the weather outside. Somehow, all of those pieces come rushing back together as one complete experience. That's because our brains don't store life as isolated events. Experiences are woven together into rich networks, and music has an unusual ability to activate many parts of those networks at the same time. It's almost like pulling on one thread and watching an entire tapestry unfold. Now, here is where this gets especially intriguing. What if music isn't simply helping us to retrieve memories? What if it's also helping us create stronger memories in the first place? Throughout the videos on this channel, we've talked about how the brain is constantly looking for patterns and predictability. Rhythm provides those patterns. Those patterns help organize our attention, and attention is one of the biggest ingredients in forming lasting memories. In other words, music may not simply be the key that unlocks the filing cabinet years later. It may have helped organize the files before they were even stored. And once you start looking at memory through that lens, you can begin to see music showing up in every stage of life, from the lullabies we heard as babies to the songs that can still reach someone who's living in the last stages of Alzheimer's disease decades later. So what is it about music that makes it such a powerful memory tool? Well, one reason is that music is never just one thing. When you hear a song, your brain isn't only processing melody or lyrics. It's tracking the rhythm. It's anticipating what comes next. It's coordinating movement. It's processing emotion and often connecting the music to the people and places around you. In other words, music recruits many different parts of the brain at the very same time. Think about some of your strongest memories from your own life. Chances are they weren't ordinary Tuesday afternoons. They were moments that captured your attention. A graduation, a wedding, a long family road trip, maybe singing around a campfire or dancing in your kitchen with your kids. Music often becomes part of those experiences, not because someone intentionally paired the two together, but because music naturally helps organize what we're paying attention to. That's important because attention is one of the first steps in creating lasting memories. Our brains are constantly deciding what deserves to be remembered and what can safely be forgotten. Most of the thousands of things we experience each day simply fade into the background. But when something captures our attention, the brain is much more likely to hold on to it. This is one of the reasons a rhythm is so fascinating. A steady beat gives the brain something predictable to follow. That predictability helps organize attention, and organized attention creates better opportunities for learning and memory. It's another example of what we've been exploring on this channel. Rhythm isn't just something we enjoy. It helps the brain organize itself while we are experiencing the world around us. And that's why music can be such a remarkable partner for learning. Whether it's singing the alphabet, chanting multiplication facts, or remembering every word to a song that you haven't heard in 20 years. Music doesn't just make information more enjoyable. It gives the brain a temporal structure that makes the experience easier to organize and ultimately easier to remember. If music helps organize our memories, it also helps explain why so many of our earliest memories are connected to songs. Think back to childhood for a moment. Even if you can't remember what you had for dinner last Tuesday, I'll bet there are songs you learned decades ago that you can still sing without much effort. The ABC song, happy birthday, nursery rhymes, camp songs, Sunday school songs, holiday songs. Somehow they've all stayed with us, even when countless other memories have faded. That's not because children have magical memories. It's because those songs are repeated over and over again, often with movements, gestures, emotions, and relationships all wrapped together. They weren't isolated pieces of information. They were rich, meaningful experiences. As we've talked about in previous videos, repetition is not boring to the brain. It's how the brain learns. Every time a child claps to a steady beat, sings a familiar song, or hears the same bedtime lullaby, the brain has another opportunity to strengthen those neural connections. The rhythm provides a predictable framework, while the repetition gives the brain repeated chances to build and reinforce the memory. I think that's one reason that music has been part of every culture for thousands and thousands of years. Long before we had printed books, smartphones, or even widespread literacy, people used songs to remember stories, histories, tradition, and other important information. Music wasn't simply entertainment. It was a remarkably effective way to preserve knowledge and pass it from one generation to another. And that doesn't stop when childhood ends. As adults, we continue attaching music to the moments that matter most. That's why we have songs for weddings and graduations, holiday celebrations, religious events, and goodbyes. Without even realizing it, we're still using music as a way of organizing our experiences and creating memory cues that can stay with us for years, even decades. Which brings us to one of the most remarkable examples of all. What happens when memory begins to fail? Perhaps the most remarkable evidence for the connection between music and memory comes later in life. If you've ever watched a person that's living with Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia, and they hear a familiar song, you've probably witnessed something that seems almost impossible. Someone who struggled to recognize family members or carry on a conversation may suddenly begin singing every word of the song they heard decades earlier. They may smile, tap their foot, clap along, or recall memories that seemed completely out of reach just moments before. Researchers are still working to understand exactly why this happens, and it's important not to overstate what science tells us. Music is not a cure for dementia, and it doesn't restore memories that have been permanently lost. But again and again, studies have shown that familiar music can improve engagement, evoke autobiographical memories, reduce anxiety, and increase social connections for many individuals that are living with dementia. To me, that is incredibly significant. It suggests that musical experiences may become woven into the brain in ways that are both deep and remarkably durable. The rhythm, the melody, the emotion, the movement, and the relationships surrounding those experiences seem to create pathways that can remain accessible long after many other memories have become difficult to reach. When you look across a lifespan, a fascinating pattern begins to emerge. We soothe babies with lullabies before they understand language. We teach children through songs, chants, and movement. Again, we celebrate life's biggest milestones with music. And when words begin to fail later in life, music often continues to provide a way to connect. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's another clue that rhythm and music are doing far more than entertaining us or that we give it credit for. They appear to be helping organize our experiences from the very beginning, strengthening the memories we create along the way and providing pathways back to those memories many, many years later. And if that's true, it has some exciting implications, not just for healthy aging, but for the way we teach, learn, and support memory every single day. So, where does this all leave us? I hope it changes the way you think about music. Instead of seeing music as something we add after the important work is finished, maybe it's time to recognize that music can actually be part of the important work itself. Whether we're helping a toddler learn language, teaching a classroom full of students, supporting an aging parent, or simply trying to remember something ourselves, music gives the brain a structure that can make experiences much more memorable. That doesn't mean every lesson needs to become a song, and it certainly doesn't mean music is a magic solution. Learning still takes practice, attention, and meaningful experiences. But when rhythm and music are woven into those experiences, they can provide a framework that helps the brain organize what it's learning. Think about your own life. The songs you remember best probably aren't the ones you heard once. They're the ones that became part of your routines, your relationships, and even your struggles. In many ways, the music became part of the memory because it became part of the experience. That's one of the reasons music has been part of every human culture throughout history. Long before neuroscientists had brain scanners, people instinctively sang to their babies, worked together in rhythm, celebrated with music, and passed on important knowledge from one generation to the next. They may not have understood the neuroscience, but they certainly understood that music helped people to remember. I'd love to know your experience. Has a song ever transported you back to a specific moment in your life? Or have you ever used music to help yourself or someone else learn or remember something? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all, and your experiences often inspire future videos. If you'd like to dig a little deeper into today's topic, be sure to download this week's free PDF. I've included the key ideas from today's episode, practical ways to use music to support memory at every age, and a few simple activities that you can start using right away. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd be grateful if you'd give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell so you don't miss a video, and share it with someone who loves learning as much as you do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Music is Academic.